It's better to acquire wisdom than gold, and to acquire understanding is more valuable than silver. There are moments in life when time seems to speak louder than ever. The end of a year is one of those moments. People look at the calendar as if the simple act of changing a date could bring answers, relief, transformation. As if the passage of time had the power to order what remains disordered within. But time does not change lives. Time does not correct decisions. Time does not automatically heal what has not been faced. Time only reveals. It reveals who walked with direction and who only moved by inertia. It reveals who made conscious decisions and who let the days pass, waiting for something external to change their story. Perhaps this year you made plans. Perhaps you promised it would be different. Perhaps you tried harder than anyone saw. And yet here you are feeling that something didn't quite fit. That doesn't mean failure, it means awareness. Because there is a weariness that does not come from the body, it comes from the soul. It is the weariness of repeating cycles, of feeling that you do a lot but advance little, of having faith but not clarity, of believing in God but not knowing exactly what path you are building. And here an uncomfortable but necessary truth appears. A life does not transform when the year changes. It transforms when the direction changes. The Bible never taught us to live waiting for magical twists of fate. It taught us to observe the path, to choose paths, to walk with wisdom even when not everything is clear. Proverbs was not written for emotional end-of-year moments. It was written for the common day, for the silent decision, for the choice that no one applauds, but that defines the future. Many will enter the next cycle with the same mind that brought them here, with the same automatic reactions, the same excuses, the same patterns. And therefore, even if the year is new, life will remain the same, because it is not the calendar that needs to change. It is the internal direction. Perhaps today you don't need more motivation. You don't need empty promises. You don't need pretty phrases that last an instant. Perhaps you need to stop, honestly look at the path you are on, and ask yourself something essential before taking another step. Where am I really walking? There is a story that is silently repeated in the lives of many people, though few dare to acknowledge it. It is the story of someone who strives, who believes, who prays, who works, but still feels that something is not progressing as it should. It is not an empty life. It is a life tired of not understanding why the results don't change. That person often says that this year was difficult, and perhaps it was. But when they look back honestly, they realize it wasn't just one difficult year. There were several similar cycles with different names, but with the same essence. People around them change, scenarios change, opportunities change, but the internal decisions remain the same. The Bible calls that walking without discernment. Not for lack of faith, but for lack of awareness. Because believing without reflection leads to exhaustion, and moving forward without direction ends in frustration. Many people confuse movement with progress. They do a lot, they keep busy. They fill themselves with tasks, but they don't stop to observe the path they are building. And when there is no observation, there is no correction. And when there is no correction, the destiny repeats itself. Proverbs speaks again and again of the wise person who observes their path. Not the one who runs fastest, not the one who promises most, but the one who understands that every daily decision leaves an invisible mark on the future. Perhaps you too have felt that strange tiredness. Not the physical tiredness that is solved with rest, but the tiredness of feeling that you are going around the same point, that you pray but you don't advance, that you believe but you don't see clarity, that you want something different but you don't know exactly what to change. That tiredness is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of awakening, because only those who begin to question their direction are ready to transform it. The problem was never the lack of opportunities, nor the lack of talent, not even the lack of faith. The problem was always the absence of daily guidance, of constant wisdom, of a reflection that accompanies every step. That's why so many people reach the end of the year with hope and begin the new one with confusion. Because they expect time to do the work that only wisdom can do. And as long as the way of thinking doesn't change, the way of living will not change. There is a silent moment in every person's life when something begins to bother them internally. It is not a visible crisis. It is not an external problem. It is an internal feeling that life could be different, but they don't know exactly how. This moment usually comes when the person realizes they don't lack information. They have heard advice, they have read phrases, they have received words of encouragement, but none of that has turned into real transformation. Because transformation is not born from hearing more, it is born from applying better. Biblical wisdom was never designed to be admired, but to be lived. That's why Proverbs doesn't just talk about believing, it talks about discerning. It doesn't just talk about desiring, it talks about choosing. The wise person is not one who never fails. It is one who observes their steps before repeating them. Many people pray hoping that God will change circumstances when what God expects is for the person to change direction. Because circumstances are often consequences, not causes. When a decision is repeated every day, it becomes a path. And when a path is traveled for a long time, it becomes destiny. That is the point most ignore. It is not the big mistakes that destroy a life. It is the small unconscious decisions sustained over time. Proverbs teaches that the prudent looks ahead, observes, evaluates, reflects before acting. But the foolish, says Scripture, walks without thinking, and then is surprised by the results. Perhaps no one taught you to pause, to observe your own mind, to understand why you react the way you react, to identify patterns that repeat over and over. And when a person doesn't understand their own patterns, they end up living on autopilot. They react to the environment, they adapt to chaos, they get used to confusion. But living like this comes at a price. The price is a life without clear direction. Wisdom begins when someone dares to ask uncomfortable questions. Why do I always decide the same way? Why do I always end up at the same point? Why do I want change but act the same way? These kinds of questions don't come by chance. They come when a person is ready to stop repeating cycles and start building paths. Because true growth is not immediate. It is daily, it is silent, it is constant, and only those who choose to walk with wisdom every day can expect different results over time. There is a profound difference between people who advance in life and those who merely survive within it. It's not a difference in opportunities. It's not a difference in intelligence. Nor is it a difference in faith. It's a difference in awareness. People who advance learn to observe themselves. They learn to read their own decisions with the same attention they read external events. They understand that life is not a succession of accidents, but the accumulated result of small choices repeated day after day. Proverbs speaks of this with absolute clarity. It says that the wise consider their path. They do not act impulsively. They do not live reacting to everything that happens around them. They walk with intention, but most people were not educated to observe their minds. They were educated to react, to adapt, to survive. And when a person lives reacting, they lose the ability to choose with clarity. They get used to deciding from fear, from urgency, from the pressure of the moment. Such decisions never build a future, they only maintain cycles. That's why so many people feel that life becomes heavy. Not because it's difficult, but because they don't know where they are going. The deepest fatigue does not come from work. It comes from internal confusion, from not understanding why the same problems, the same relationships, the same frustrations keep repeating. Biblical wisdom teaches something essential. He who does not define his direction ends up being carried along any path. And that is one of the greatest dangers of modern life. The constant noise, the rush, the lack of inner silence. Without silence, there is no reflection. Without reflection, there is no discernment. And without discernment, decisions become automatic. Proverbs insists again and again that wisdom begins within. Not externally, not in circumstances, not in others. It begins when someone decides to govern their mind before trying to govern their reality. Because when the mind has no direction, life also has none. Perhaps you were never told that thinking with wisdom is a spiritual act, that reflecting before acting is a form of obedience, But every time you choose with awareness, every time you decide not to repeat a pattern, every time you pause before reacting, you are building a different future, even if you cannot yet see it. And that is the exact point where a life begins to transform. There's a truth almost no one clearly teaches. Wisdom is not an event, it's a habit. It doesn't suddenly appear in a moment of inspiration. It's built slowly, day after day, in silence. Many people seek a big change when what they really need is constant direction. Because it's not an isolated decision that transforms a life, but a sequence of decisions aligned with purpose. The Bible never promised a life without difficulties. It promised a life with understanding. And understanding doesn't eliminate problems, but it prevents a person from getting lost within them. Proverbs insists on something fundamental. The wise learn every day, observe every day, reflect every day. They don't live waiting for the perfect moment because they know the perfect moment never arrives. They live building clarity amidst imperfection. This is where many get confused. They believe they need complete answers when what they need is daily guidance. They believe they need to know the entire path, when in reality, they only need to know what the next correct step is. Wisdom works like this. It doesn't reveal everything at once. It reveals what's necessary for today. Therefore, when a person begins to walk with daily wisdom, something changes internally before it changes externally. The mind calms, decisions become clearer, the noise loses its strength, and little by little, almost without realizing it, life stops being an automatic repetition and begins to become a conscious construction. It's not about doing more, it's about choosing better. It's not about running faster, it's about walking with meaning. There are people who read a wise phrase and move on, and there are people who take a word of wisdom and turn it into a daily guide. The difference between the two is not in what they hear, but in what they practice. Perhaps that's why you feel you need something deeper. Not more information, not more noise, but a voice that accompanies you daily, that helps you reflect before deciding, that reminds you every day what kind of person you are building with your choices. Because when wisdom becomes constant, direction becomes clear. And when direction is clear, the future ceases to be a threat and becomes a path. There's a moment on the journey when a person understands something essential. They don't need answers for their whole life. They need guidance for each day. That understanding changes everything, because when someone stops seeking immediate solutions and begins to seek constant wisdom, anxiety loses its grip and clarity begins to take its place. Life doesn't become perfect, but it becomes coherent. Decisions stop being impulsive and begin to align with a greater purpose. Proverbs was never a book to be read occasionally. It was designed as daily companionship, like a soft voice that guides, corrects, and reminds what kind of path is worth building. That's why true wisdom doesn't shout. It doesn't pressure, it doesn't impose. It accompanies in the silence of the morning, in doubt before deciding, in the necessary pause before reacting. And when a person allows wisdom to accompany them like this, something profound happens. They begin to live with intention. They no longer act solely out of emotion. They no longer decide solely out of habit. They no longer react automatically to everything that occurs. They begin to choose how to respond, to choose what to accept, to choose what to let go of, to choose what to build. That kind of life is not born from a special day. It is born from daily practice, from constant reflection, from a continuous connection with unchanging principles. Perhaps that's why you feel you need something more stable. Not a word that excites for a few minutes, but a direction that remains when the emotion is gone. Because true transformation doesn't happen when everything is going well. It happens when, even amidst confusion, you know where you are walking. And when wisdom becomes part of your routine, decisions stop being a burden and become an expression of who you are. Not because everything is resolved, but because you no longer walk blindly. Reaching this point in the journey is not a coincidence. Not everyone stops to reflect before entering a new cycle. Most simply continue, dragging the same mind, the same reactions, the same invisible habits. But there is a moment, subtle, silent, when a person realizes they don't want to keep living the same way. Not because their life is bad, but because they sense it could be more conscious, more aligned, more true. That moment doesn't always come with certainties. Sometimes it comes with questions, with discomfort, with an internal feeling that something needs to change, even if you don't yet know exactly what. And that's okay, because great transformations don't begin with clear answers. They begin with an internal decision, not to walk without direction again. The Bible speaks of this instant as an awakening. Not a noisy awakening, but a profound realization. A change of perspective, a new way of interpreting life. At this point, the person understands that they cannot control everything, but they can choose how they walk. They cannot foresee every difficulty, but they can decide with what principles they will face them. And that decision changes everything. Because when you choose to walk with wisdom, you no longer depend on chance. You no longer live waiting for time to do the work for you. You begin to build with intention. This is the kind of consciousness that separates those who repeat cycles from those who build destinies. It's not about perfection, it's about direction. It's not about doing everything right. It's about not continuing to walk blindly. Perhaps this year-end doesn't ask for new promises. Perhaps it asks for honesty, to look at yourself truthfully, to recognize which paths you no longer want to repeat and what kind of life you are willing to build from now on. Because time will keep passing, that is inevitable. The question is another: how will you walk as it passes? Reaching this point already says something important about you. Not everyone allows themselves to stop, reflect, and look at their own life with honesty. Many prefer to be distracted. Others prefer to stay busy. But only those who stop can choose a different path. Perhaps this year taught you more than you imagine. Not only through what worked, but above all, through what was repeated. Because the cycles that hurt also teach, if we are willing to learn from them. You don't need to carry guilt for the past. Wisdom does not look back to condemn. It looks forward to guide. True change doesn't start with a new date. It begins with an internal decision, to walk with intention, to think before acting, to choose consciously each day. When you do that, life stops feeling like a constant struggle and begins to feel like a building process. Step by step, calmly, with clarity. Not everything is resolved immediately, but everything starts to make sense. Because whoever walks with wisdom no longer depends on luck, nor on empty promises, nor on momentary impulses. They walk with direction, and when the direction is clear, time stops being an enemy and becomes an ally. If this message resonated with you, stop for a moment before scrolling further. Like it, share it with someone who needs clarity at this cycle's end. And write in the comments a single word that represents your decision from now on. Not for me, for you, because time will keep passing for everyone. But only those who decide to walk with wisdom truly move forward.